Good afternoon. My name is Christopher, Operations Director at Civil Service College UK. In this session, my presentation will focus on why and how language proficiency should be developed as civil servants develop key skills at each stage of their career. It is important that civil servants see language learning is relevant and an important part of their professional development journey. Otherwise, civil servants will treat this as a standalone and learning would not be sustainable. Today, we will look at three areas. First, the language used in the civil service. Why is there a need for us to understand the context, purpose, and end goal? Second, the relationship between the functions of public services and the use of language, especially that language is dynamic, and why this is relevant to civil servants' professional development journey. Third, we will look at an example where we train staff from countries where English is not their first language. What was our approach and focus? And how Taiwan can work with overseas partners to increase learning opportunities and embed learning. If we only look at English language, most of you would assume that we don't have any issues in the UK, as English is our native language. Here are some examples where people in the UK don't understand the language used by the UK civil service. On the top left, we have an article by The Independent reported that our former Prime Minister David Cameron said the civil service needs to use simple language. On the bottom left, our Public Administration Select Committee in Parliament did a review and published a report about bad language used by public servants. And then The Guardian published an article to decode words often used by the UK civil servants. And what exactly do they mean? What does this all tell us? The use of language in the public sector is unique. Let's look at some examples listed in The Guardian. Civil servants use carriageway defects, whereas we would say road faults. They often use going forward, whereas we would say in future. Former UK Deputy Prime Minister used hypothecation, where he meant pledging money by law. These are just some examples where the word civil servants use may not mean the same as other people. Understanding their language requires time and regular engagement. You will also learn a lot about how they work. This is particularly useful for civil servants in Taiwan who work with other governments. Let's now look at some English words used outside the UK. In my role, I worked with a number of governments in the Commonwealth, from Caribbean, South Africa to East and Southeast Asia, and I was quite confused when I first heard them. First, prepone. We use postpone, but we don't use prepone in the UK. This is certainly used elsewhere. For us, we will say bring forward to an earlier date of time. Second, revert back. Do they mean undo or revert back to previous version? Not at all. They meant please give me an update or confirm. Last, do the needful. Do that which is needed. Here are just some examples of how other countries use English differently. As civil servants engage with other civil services, they will notice these differences. Overseas exposure and engagement will help civil servants in Taiwan to learn more about other civil service language. For their complexity, the question is about their standards. In 2016, the UK government published a code of practice on the English language requirement for public sector workers. On this slide, I have an extract from the code of practice. I won't go into the code of practice in details. I will only highlight some key parts. When deciding the standards, it's about the type of the role. The decision should be made by each public authority, and it is they who knows best the nature and extent of the communications which is necessary for effective performance. The standards required of a community engagement officer in a local government will be very different to an economist in a central government ministry. Likewise, their performance indicators for both roles would be different. The emphasis is on context and purpose for which language is being used to achieve. The Code of Practice has a specific section on level of language proficiency. Note that here the emphasis is on the importance of context. It is not necessarily about remembering and being able to use sophisticated words. And it is not about speaking each word with perfect pronunciation in the Queen's accent. It is about being able to speak in a language that members of the public will understand. Imagine a community engagement officer who works with diverse communities, speaks with technical language like an economist. Would the communities this officer work with be able to understand? Would this officer able to perform his or her duty effectively? There are two learning points from this. First, there is no one-size-fits-all standard. It is about the civil servant's role and the function of the department. Second is about the end goal. Is language an end in itself? Ultimately, it's about delivering public services to the citizens, whether it's fluency or proficiency. The purpose is to ensure the needs of the citizens are understood and delivering vital services. Here in the next part, we will talk about the third point. Governance and social change are inseparable. And language has a very close relationship with social change. Our use of language will change as there's a shift in social attitude, whether civil servants are working on initiatives to drive social change or updating existing services in light of social change. Civil servants will need to adapt to newer understanding. Diversity and inclusion has been trending in the UK. We are more conscious to be an inclusive society. Here's an extract from Government Communications Services guidance on inclusive language. The word civil servants should use and what to avoid when writing about disability. For example, we avoid using the handicapped or the disabled. Instead, we use the disabled people. We don't use mentally handicapped. Instead, we use someone with learning disability. We don't say the blind. Instead, we say people with visual impairments. This shift in our language is because of social change. Government is about social change. So this will happen throughout a civil servant's career. It is not just about the words we use, it's about the message we are sending to members of the public. Inclusive language is about being positive and not negative. A person with impairments might not experience any discomfort or suffers from something. In fact, a person with impairment with the right support can live a very fulfilling life. So the learning of inclusive language is a requirement from a language perspective or a requirement of a broader issue. I would argue is about better awareness of diversity and inclusion. Social change will happen throughout civil servants' career. The need to learn continuously is imperative. As civil servants learn new skills and adopt latest thinking, language learning can be an integral part at every stage. After standards and purpose, continuous development is our third point. Whether it's learning inclusive language or making comparison between Taiwan's digital democracy and Western democratic models, these are opportunities for civil servants to practice languages and be confident in using them. Let's look at this from another angle. A new civil servant who just joined the service would need to learn how to write effective briefing. It could be meeting briefing for their senior leaders or a policy brief. And that would require development of policy skills. As these civil servants progress to middle management, this civil servant will attend international meetings and will require international negotiating skills. Later in this civil servant's career, speech writing, leadership and digital communications become essential. Developing these skills in English throughout their professional development career will help build confidence in applying the learning in real-life situations. Out of the 5 skills, I will give you an example on writing effective briefing. Although we are not a language learning institution like other speakers you have heard earlier today, we deliver training to countries where English is not their first language. We were tasked by a multilateral development institution to enhance written briefing skills of their staff. They are a multicultural organization. They have staff from across the world, from Brazil, Ghana to Vietnam. Many of the staff are technical experts. They use technical terminology and often write in an academic style. As they work with donors and member states, information in a fast-paced political environment needs to be succinct and help to achieve a purpose. The challenge we faced was creating content suitable for these multicultural teams in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, so that they can write good briefings in English. This diagram illustrates our approach. We met with stakeholders to understand the challenges. This allowed us to understand the culture, local context, and their roles. We use pre-training assessment to understand how they currently write briefing and their current understanding of purpose of briefing. We also reviewed existing briefings and their organization's editorial guidelines. All these data fed back into the design of learning materials. The delivery was split into two parts. It included group discussions, analysis of real briefing papers, and practical written exercises. To embed learning, we found giving participants the time and space to reflect very valuable. Hence, the delivery was split into two parts, so that participants can reflect and practice through offline written exercises. We collected immediate feedback to monitor shift in the understanding on the purpose of briefing and what a good briefing looks like. From the immediate feedback, as well as our trainers' feedback, we can identify those who need additional support. One-to-one support gives an individual a safe space to practice. Immediate evaluation only provides a snapshot, and it doesn't really tell us whether the training made a lasting impact. So feedback from the supervisor are valuable. It allowed us to see whether improvement is sustainable. It's about the end users and whether the briefing is useful for the end users. Evaluation reports will inform us on the design of the next phase of the training. Depending on learning outcomes, we can consider using other learning options, such as webinar, masterclass, pre-recorded videos, etc. If we take a step back and look at how Taiwan overseas partners like Civil Service College can help embed learning, here are some examples. Listen to podcasts. Take part in overseas webinar. Since the pandemic, we have been welcoming civil servants from other countries to our webinars. Colleagues from Taiwan have attended too. Pre-recorded videos with bilingual subtitles will allow participants to learn with content at their own pace. In fact, we are working with Civil Service Protection and Training Commission in using pre-recorded videos with bilingual subtitles in an upcoming virtual training programs this year. Policy papers in bilingual languages can also be provided to participants to read. It is also equally valuable to have support from internal and external mentor or coach. And there are also a lot of online resources that participants can use. To wrap up, it's about the role and function of the civil servants and the departments. Remember the purpose. It's about delivering better public services to the citizen. It's about the end users. And it's about making learning sustainable and helps civil servants to learn continuously in their professional development journey. To finish off, I would like to highlight this paragraph from the code of practice that we saw earlier. One of the best ways to improve language skills is to converse with native speakers. One-to-one support with someone who understands the context of the role is likely to help individuals currently operating in the workplace more than a generic English language class. The more international exposure that we can give to our civil servants, the more that they can build up their confidence in applying languages. Thank you very much for attending. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Here are my contact details. Do connect with me on LinkedIn and Line. I hope we can collaborate together in the future. Thank you.